500 Abarth. Coming up to a stop sign here. This is a fun little car. So I'm going to give you my initial driving impressions. I've had it for a couple days, commuted with it a couple days, and of course taking it out after work to give it a spin through the neighborhood and around the area. I'm very fortunate to live near some curvy roads, so I like to take it out for a drive. Not sure exactly where to start, but I'll start with this. It's not a fast car, but it's a fun car. So overall, especially in normal mode, so this car has a sport button, and we'll get to that in a minute, but when you're just driving on normally, it's actually a pretty well-mannered car. The clutch uptake is a little high. Clutch is actually a little firmer than I expected, but it's not too bad. And I'm comparing that to other smaller hatchbacks I've driven, specifically Fiesta ST. A little heavier clutch. The first thing that I'm actually really surprised about, and I'll go ahead and smash the sport button, but the first thing I'm surprised about is this car actually seems pretty well put together. I always had a thought, I always was impressed that these were pretty cheap cars. I mean, they weren't that expensive when they were new, and then used, the values just went off a cliff. Obviously, I picked this up less than $5,000. So it seemed to me that the car itself must be cheap. There must be a lot of cheap stuff about it. And I think in the interior you definitely see that. It's an economy car. But at 162,000 miles, this car doesn't have any rattles. I mean, I've had Subarus and, reliable cars that have rattles way sooner than that. This thing doesn't rattle. The suspension doesn't feel worn out. It's still tight. It feels tall because you are sitting upright. It's no Miata. Your butt isn't dragging on the road, but it feels tight, and I'm actually quite surprised. So let's talk about that sport button. And I've heard other people say that it's probably one of the most effective sport buttons in any car, and I'd probably have to agree with that. Apparently, they actually detuned the normal mode, so you only get 150 pound-feet of torque, and when you hit the sport button, you get 170 pound-feet of torque, and that's pretty significant. I mean, the engine's only 160 horsepower, so like I said, this isn't a fast car. I mean, that's the amount of horsepower of most. It's a little more than most normal sedans, but and like Corolla, Civic, non-sport models. But I mean, it's not in the Honda Civic Si, Fiesta ST. It's more Miata levels of power. But with the turbo and with the exhaust, it takes it to the next level. I've driven Miatas and I like them. I like Miatas, don't get me wrong. But this is way more fun. It definitely handles differently because of the tall factor. It feels tall, and it is tall, but it's forgivable. It's quite practical. You got 4 seats, and not that I'd really use the back seats, but if you don't use the back seats, then you got cargo room and you got a hatch, so you can haul stuff. I like hatches. So anyway, back to the sport button. It artificially tightens up the steering, and when it tightens up, I mean it adds artificial heaviness to the rack. I don't like that so much. The normal steering feel is actually good. It's not super light to begin with, in my opinion, so adding fake weight to the steering doesn't really add anything to the driving experience. But the way the engine responds is different. Now, my one criticism of sport mode on pretty much any car that has a sport button is that when they remap the throttle, they say, I feel like all manufacturers do this, They just say, all right, we're going to remap the throttle so that at 50% pedal travel, you have 100% power. And to me, that really doesn't, it makes it feel faster because you're like, oh, I pushed the pedal a quarter of the way down and now I'm going really fast. But the problem is when you push the pedal all the way down, you get like 10% more. So I'm not a fan of that. I'd rather have the ability to, use the pedal travel as I see fit and demand the amount of power that I need more precisely or want, rather than have to deal with reduced or higher sensitivity because you've now reduced the pedal travel effectively. So that's my one criticism. But again, overall, I really like it. Sport button is a must. Basically, anytime you're doing any type of fun driving, you get more torque. You can feel it. The turbo spools up faster. It feels more responsive because of the, decreased pedal travel like I talked about. But, they did a good job, and overall, it's really fun. Now let's talk about compared to the competition, and really the only other thing that comes to mind, first gen Miata, yeah, might be able to get one of those for $5,500. And to be fair, I don't have any experience with the first gen Miata, so I don't really know, can't really compare to that. But Civic Si, again, haven't spent a lot of time with the Civic Si, but this, in my mind, it blows it out of the water. The Civic Si is, and maybe that's my like for turbos, but it's just not as fun. Yeah, it has more power, but you have to get it revved way up, and it doesn't have that kick. I really like the turbo response in this car. Actually, one of my favorite things about it. It's a little bit more old school. It really doesn't kick in until about 3,000 RPMs, and it does kind of run out of breath about 5,500. But in that low end, as you're coming, when you downshift and you get 2,000 to 3,000 RPM, you get a big kick, a turbo. And when I say big, it's not that big, but it feels cool. It feels like you're building power, and it makes it a lot of fun. So overall, engine, I really like it. It's responsive. Of course, with a good exhaust, it sounds good. Working back in the drivetrain, transmission itself, I don't have a problem with, and I actually really like the 5-speed. Most sports cars I've driven have 6 speeds. But with this 5-speed, it really gives you a lot of latitude. I can hang out in second and third gear on curvy roads, and that's all I ever need. Second gear for the tight corners, and then if it's big sweepers, third gear, and you're perfect. So like this tight corner down into second.
Say a command.
And I smashed the command button. All right, let's try that again. Into this corner, down into second, coming out of the corner. Oh yeah. Just get that building of power. So yeah, transmission, I don't have a problem with the transmission itself. I actually really like the gearing and the gear ratios. The thing I do have a problem with is the shifter. Now maybe this one's worn out, but I feel like I remember this from when I test drove a new one. I don't know how to explain it. It's like those shifters on those arcade games, like where you could have an optional manual transmission on the arcade racing game. I'm talking about like Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, and it has that like 4-speed. It kind of feels like that. It's just like ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Really not a good feeling shifter. And again, maybe this one's old, but it also feels really loose and imprecise. So yeah, not in love with the shifter feel. But again, transmission, don't really have a problem with. Seems quite robust. Clutch seems pretty robust too. I don't have any slipping after 162,000 miles, and I have no indication that it's been changed. So, best of my knowledge, it's the original clutch and it's still going strong. All right, for handling, I already kind of mentioned it, but let's get into some corners here, talk about handling. So I talked about how the car is tall, but it doesn't roll. It feels, it's almost honestly just the right amount of tightness. You want a little body roll to feel fun, and I think the car that exemplifies that most to me, well, it's Miata and Fiesta ST. Both of them are very sharp handlers. and they have a little bit of body roll. So body roll to me is not the enemy, but it just needs to be managed. This thing does great in sweepers. I've never really felt it get unsettled in a corner, and haven't pushed it that hard, partially because I don't know if it was the last owner. I assume it was the dealership. They put 2 new tires on the front, but they're a different size, and of course they're kind of bargain basement tires, and they're on the front, so I haven't really pushed the car too hard. That's on the to-do list, is to get new tires. Oh yeah. The brakes on this car feel proper. That's one of my biggest gripes about driving normal cars, and one of the biggest reasons I wanted to get back into a little sports car is the brake feel on a sedan or a truck is just, I always feel like the pedal is mushy, and I've taken it in to try to get it fixed, and I've bled brakes and changed pads, and I think getting even more aggressive pads is really the answer there for a normal car, but I've never felt like the brake pedal really feels solid on everyman cars. But this car, the brake pedal feels appropriate. Again, short wheelbase, stiff suspension. She rides pretty stiff. I've already determined that between the stiff suspension and the kind of droney exhaust at highway speeds, this isn't going to be a road trip car, which might explain why most examples you see out there don't have that many miles on them, even though this car has been out for 9 years or more, at least in this case. 2012, I don't know exactly when they went on sale, but at least 9 years that this car's been around. So pretty easy to find them with lower miles. And again, I'm actually favorably impressed. While the interior is not top-notch quality, everything pretty much works. Either that's the testament to the maintenance of the previous owner, but overall nothing is scary. Nothing's banging, rattling, clunking. One thing this car doesn't have is a lot of low-end torque before the turbo kicks in. I've owned a Fiesta ST before, so you'll probably hear me refer to that a couple more times, but that thing has a lot of low-end torque, and I guess it is after the turbo kicks in, but the turbo kicks in almost immediately, so you really have a lot of torque in that thing. It's a torque monster. This guy, you really got to get it up to 3,000, so going up that hill in 5th gear wasn't really a possibility. I did have to downshift into the 4th, going about 50 miles an hour up that hill. Once you get up to highway speeds, though, you can pretty much leave it in 5th for all but the steepest of hills. So if I were to sum up the driving impression, I would say this car is fun. Nice short wheelbase, makes it feel really responsive in the turns. Steering is good, especially in normal mode. The steering, I think, is just right in normal mode. In sports mode, it's a little artificially heavy, but it feels precise, and I think with better tires on the front, it's going to get even better. Well, we're headed back into town now. So I think that'll about wrap up the driving impressions. Thanks for checking out my channel. If you are willing to, please like and subscribe so I can know to keep making more videos. Keep sharing my ownership experience of the Fiat with you guys. Thanks for tuning in. initial driving impressions?